Welcome to the Reality Shift podcast. My guest today is a guy I'm lucky to call a friend, a mentor, and a man who has led me in my walk with Christ and ultimately was the key individual who led me to Christ. So, welcome, Brian.
Thanks. Excited to be on your podcast, Ethan.
Yeah, dude, it's gonna be lit. I don't know what to expect, but we're just learning by doing.
Yeah. Yep.
uh, Yeah, so one of the things that you taught me from the time when I was about 12, lifting with you, um,
hmm
one of the first things you essentially installed with me by going and doing those workouts at like 5 a.m. in the morning, 6 a.m. in the morning when we were both half awake and it was freezing cold out and we only had one flashlight in the gym
Yeah.
was like uh, just having discipline and actually showing up. And
Mhm.
one of the things I've always been curious about is where did that come from for you? Because I just started doing it and just following you and seeing a dude that's doing it. I was like, okay, I'm gonna emulate him. Like, where did that come from for you?
Um, so like I've always been like naturally curious. When I was in high school, I don't remember who told it to me, but somebody basically said like in high school is your last chance to truly explore the world like freely because
Mhm.
you're not concerned about paying for your house or your food or um, you kind of have a little bit of your benefit of like being young, and so people just brush off any like weirdness about you on like, oh, he's like 16, he'll develop soon kind of thing.
Mhm.
And so I didn't really buckle down and play a single sport or do a single type of art or listen to a single type of music. Like I was constantly like I did like rugby and soccer and
Mhm.
paintballing and musical theater and choir, and I was in a death metal band, was super involved in church. Like I just was all over the place. And so I've always had this natural curiosity of like I want to know what doing this thing is like. Um, and in like exploring things, I think I found that I used to say like doing hard things. I don't think that that's a helpful description. I like more saying like doing rigorous things. I think a lot of people think hard things and they think you have to be suffering in order to do something hard.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of rigorous things I've done that are like physically challenging or mentally challenging that are enjoyable. Like I'm not miserable. Uh, there might be like different like pieces of it that aren't comfortable, but that's different than pain, right? Discomfort is different than pain, I think a lot of times. It's just exploring something new. So I think like doing rigorous things or doing new things is a better description of like what I was learning. But fitness is a place where you're constantly challenging your body to bend more or to lift more or to explode more, right? Like you're
Mhm.
trying to figure out what your body's capable of. And the cool thing about fitness is you can never be good at all of it all at once. Like if
Mhm.
you run a lot, your deadlift's going to suffer to some extent. If you do more legs, like your upper body's going to suffer, right? Like and your
Mhm.
body is just constantly capable of responding to those inputs and stretching and becoming better at one thing. And on top of that, you have limited time to work out, limited time to sleep, limited time to eat. Um, there's a bunch of resources that are limited out there, and like we are one of those limited resources. And so fitness is doesn't get boring because you're constantly exploring your body and how it's capable of interacting with the world to
Mhm.
different goals. So I think that like ultimately to go back to it, like doing rigorous things for me doesn't come from finding value in rigor. It comes from finding value in like curiosity, exploration, and creativity. And I think I've seen that like across my entire life. And fitness is a place where I get to revisit it every single day.
Mhm. Yeah, dude. Like I remember you talking about how you do rugby and theater, and like there'd be times where you just go run for and put on your music. And did you have a walking man?
Yeah.
Was that a Walkman? Not a walking man, a Walkman. You
No,
just
I
like
back then I think I had an iPod then, but
okay.
uh, I did have a CD Walkman until I was like a senior in high school.
Ah, sick, bro. You're one of the cool people.
Uh, no, it wasn't cool then. It wasn't
Oh
cool in
yeah, because
2008
it
to have
was
a
what
CD Walkman.
probably early 2000s, mid 2000. Oh
2008
wait.
was when I started my senior year. I graduated in '09. So
Oh.
yeah, Walkmans weren't cool, whether it was a cassette or a CD Walkman. having an iPod was cool. But my sister bought me one when I was a senior.
Okay, she's a G for that. She saved
She
you.
is. She's
Did
very cool.
Yeah, I was about to say because uh, you were like you told me about how you turn that on and just like run for hours, and I remember like now I'm at the point with my knee that I can do that, and I'll just turn on music, and if I'm wanting to deal with something, instead of turning on music, I'll just run uh, as long as I can until I basically come up with the solution to the problem. Or sometimes it just gives me the ability to spend time with God, and that was one of the, I remember hearing you say that, and I was like, "That's a good idea. I'm gonna start doing it." It helped a lot because I'm always
Yeah.
around people, and I need quiet time, and that's my quiet time for me.
Then was when my iPod Nano held a whole 100 songs, I think. So every Friday I would switch up the CDs I put on it.
Oh yeah, I remember you saying that, dude. I was like, "Hmm."
Mhm.
So what was your like go-to songs, like albums back then?
Uh, Dude, one of my favorite CDs to run to back in the day was Wolf Biker by Evergreen Terrace, and then I was really into anything Sleeping Giant put out. I listened to a lot of Stick to Your Guns. I was really into a band called Venia.
Okay.
Uh, um, what else did I like to run to back then? I liked Have Heart a lot then. Champion. I don't know, all sorts of like hardcore and metal bands. I probably listened to Impending Doom a lot back then. Not sure who else, but yeah, a lot of metal and hardcore music, um, for sure. But yeah,
Yeah, dude. Sleeping Giant has always been the best, like one of the best. That and Stick to Your Guns are like
yeah,
two of the dopest bands
hmm
to like live to. And I've hit
they're
a couple
both
PRs with that.
they're
That and
both
August Burns Red.
yeah, ABR is good. But yeah,
Yeah,
those are both really good Southern California hardcore bands.
yeah.
Sleeping
I
Giant
think
was like Redlands, and Stick to Your Guns was Orange County.
okay. And you, oh no, I was gonna say, did you play? Because there is what were you had a band? What was that called again?
My band in high school was Lion of Judah. My band in college was Exhort, but I did vocals in both of them.
Oh yeah. And then wait. So you did like the like a music. You did a couple of songs with Colin, right?
We did one recently, yeah.
How'd that turn out?
It's good. I can't believe I haven't shown it to you. I'll send you a link to it after this.
Okay, that would be
But
dope. Yeah, because I
it
was
was good.
wondering how that turned out. Did your voice like last afterward?
For the first song, yeah, and we recorded a significant amount of two other ones, but I definitely got tired because I think we recorded for like 2 hours or something.
Jeez.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
Well, sick,
I
dude.
don't have the voice I used to have, so
Dude, you're like what? Like 31.
I'm
You're not that
32.
old. What? Oh yeah, you're 32. I just realized that.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I finished up being in a band when I was 21, so and I used to do
Oh,
it a lot, and I don't do it all the time anymore. So your vocal muscles just get tired, so
yeah.
you
It's
can't do hardcore vocals forever. But
so one of the things that I think you've taught me. Well, no, when we had gone shooting that one time.
mhm.
Well, we gone shooting a couple times. One of the times we went up in, I think it was like over in Olympia,
Cap State Forest, yeah.
and yeah, and it was super cool. We were on in the middle of like a mini valley,
Mhm.
and when we were driving around, we talked about stoicism and how it's getting super popular with like the Daily Stoic and all of those people, Robert Greene and I'm blanking on the other guy's name, Ryan Holiday. And so when we were talking about like stoicism and like Christianity and also emotions, and one of the quotes that you brought up was you can't choose what you feel, but you can choose how you care about it. You're
Yeah,
limited. And I remember
yeah,
hearing that and I was like, that's a good quote. And then when I started thinking about it, I was like, that's way deeper than I thought. Because we had talked about like dads that will be like, they're trying to act all stoic
mhm.
and they'll be like, their kid will die. And like, I gotta be all stoic and not show any emotion. And I gotta live through it and always get better. That like where'd that come from? That quote.
Well, the quote came from a dude named Mark Smith, who is he has a company, might call it wrong, but it's like JBS Training Industries or Enterprises or something.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a competitive shooter, and I did a like a tune-up call with him,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we were talking about how like sometimes when you miss, um, fear or anger or shame can come up and make your heart rate increase and give you adrenaline that you don't need that make it hard to get stable for a follow-up shot. And so, yeah, the quote I think was, "You can't choose what to feel, but you can choose." I can't remember,
Like
but
how to.
something to the extent of like or you can't choose not to care, but you can choose. Let me see. I think I might actually have it in my notes over here. Let's see. Uh, you can't choose not to care. You can choose what you care about, and that's what it is. You can't choose not to care. You can choose what to care about. And I don't fully agree with the quote, but I think that the thrust of it makes sense. In my own interpretation is like you can't choose not to feel, but you can choose like how you process that emotion and when.
Mm-hmm.
And so like if I'm in the middle of a stage and I miss, and I feel fear or anxiety or shame, like those are feelings that need attention and they need expression, but they might not need expression right then. So I can go through my processing of my emotions and say, hey, like anger against or shame or fear, like they're not helpful to taking another shot and getting it to hit steel right now. So I'm going to set those aside and I'm going to focus on the task at hand, which is I missed, so I need to analyze and assess what happened, and then I need to apply the lessons learned, whether that's like a dope shift or whether I was looking at the wrong target or I'm not focusing on the right part of my reticle, whatever. And then I need to re-engage so that I can get that hit, because you only have 90 seconds in a stage to hit all your targets. But later, in between stages, I do need to like pay attention to the unhealthy shame, which says I am broken, and change it to healthy shame, which says I am limited. So I give myself grace. I need to take my unhealthy anger, which is rage, and I need to swap that over to passion or anger for doing well, and anger for analyzing and assessing. And if I have fear, the proper response to fear is wisdom. So it's planning for what I can control and releasing what I can't control. Because again, if my shame is healthy, then it says I'm limited and there's space for me to not be perfect. I can't control the wind, for example, for shooting.
Yeah.
So yeah, I need to process those emotions before I go to the next stage, or I'm going to carry them with me. And so your example of like being stoic in the face of grief, like that's not loving to the other people who are also grieving, because they need to see that you're weeping as well, like because of loss. Loss assigns value, like the feeling of loss and grief, it assigns value to something that you don't have anymore. And so the greater I emote in response to loss, the greater I communicate that that thing was important to me, or that thing or that person, whatever I lost. And grief needs to be expressed, and it also needs to be shared, because that's empathetic. It makes people feel, it fights loneliness in loss. So I think I think maybe there's some people who would argue that like the way I'm characterizing stoicism isn't an accurate characterization of stoicism, but I think there are people who say that they're stoic or they're stoics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they think that that means that they don't show their emotion in the face of like loss or suffering in front of other people. And I think that that's a misuse of the feelings that we have, because I think I've told it to you, but like in counseling, my counselor always reminds me that feelings illuminate needs and needs require actions.
Yeah.
And so grieving, the act of grieving is an action that sadness illuminates a need for. If I stuff things, then I become, I despair, or I become bitter, resentful, etc. And that can be against God, it can be against other people, it can even be against the person that we lost. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
not expressing that, it's going to affect us at some point in the future, I think.
Okay.
But yeah, yeah. So although I do think like control of your emotion is helpful, but I think control of your emotion is knowing what an emotion is, being able to describe it, and then processing it appropriately, not stuffing
Mm-hmm.
it down or saying that emotion is unhealthy, therefore it's invaluable, or it's not valuable. And it's like, no, if that emotion is unhealthy, you should troubleshoot why it's unhealthy, and then you should explore what the healthy expression of that anger or sadness or shame are, and then experience that instead. So,
Okay. So like when you were doing like for shooting with you, you can't control the wind, but you can control how you feel about the situation. And you
hmm
can, let's say you have anger or rage, for example, you can
hmm
take that and then turn that into passion. Uh,
hmm
and I think that's a beautiful thing because most of the time we stay in the anger or rage and not try to transform it into something that we can ultimately utilize and
to
uh,
achieve something. Yeah.
harness. Yeah. And so, like, for me, one of those things was like, before I always used to get super, super angry. And now I figured out I can channel it and then put it towards working out or studying real estate, like doing my real estate license,
Yeah.
uh, or like this.
It's,
And so, yeah,
those things are anger. They're just healthy anger. They're passion
yeah,
for instead of anger against or rage against. Yeah.
yeah. And so, like,
Another thing too, like on the note of anger is like anger tends to sit on top of other emotions. So like, for example, I think with men a lot, it sits on top of hurt. So somebody hurt us and we're afraid that we're hurt because hurt can be seen as like being a victim. Like you hurt me,
mm,
therefore I'm a victim of your hurt kind of thing.
yeah,
And then so we are like, oh, I'm angry that you hurt me because anger is big and scary and makes
mm,
people feel intimidated.
yeah,
Um, but the proper response or the need that like hurt illuminates is the need for healing. And so that's ultimately like a need to get with this person who hurt you. If they are somebody that you like want to have a relationship with, whether it's a friendship, a marriage, or whatever, and
mm,
like you have to say like, hey, you hurt me, and this is how you hurt me, and then it's an opportunity to be cared for, and then to experience healing, and then reconciliation. Um, Even if we can't reconcile with somebody who's hurt us, like let's say it's like a toxic relationship where there's like a pattern of hurting someone over and over again, it's on us not to feel angry and lash out back at them and then cause hurt in their life. It's up to us to establish a boundary and communicate the boundary to the person who's hurt us and said, hey, like you have a pattern of hurting me in this way. And therefore, like I'm not going to interact with you to this level anymore, maybe or at all. Maybe like I'm gonna have to cut you off for a little bit until you work through the behaviors that you have that cause me hurt over and over and over again. But even that takes courage because those
mm,
types of like those types of social interactions can be scary because there might be like familial ramifications if it's a parent or a
mm,
sibling. There could be like financial ramifications if it's a boss, right? Um, but you have to have those conversations and address the needs that your feelings are illuminating. That takes courage. Like actually, I was just talking about this. I did a officer professional development brief this weekend with my reserve unit,
mm,
and we were talking about courage. And I talked to my battalion XO, and I was like, I think that a lot of people think that instead of feeling fear, you should feel courage. But I think that fear is necessary to courage. Like John Wayne has a quote, I might botch a little bit, but he says like, courage isn't uh, courage isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid but saddling up anyway. That's what he says.
yeah,
And so it's the idea that like I feel afraid, but because I know that there's this thing that's valuable out there that I should fight for, so healthy anger, I'm
mm,
going to act in the face of fear. Acting in the face of fear is courage or bravery, whatever you want to call it, but it requires fear to exist so that you can actually be courageous. If you're not afraid, then you're just acting. Like uh, there's nothing to risk, and therefore courage isn't like valuable or honorable. It's just you just doing the right thing. So
mm.
yeah, we have to have courage and we have to address people that have hurt us and either set a boundary or seek healing. And both those things are potentially scary, but it's what we ought to do.
Yeah. I really like the John Wayne quote because for me, I don't like the dark. I haven't since I was little. So one of the things I told myself was, I'm gonna make it every single time I run. I have to run in the dark, and so I'll run from like Fall City, like Carnation, and it's pitch black
Yeah.
out there. And there's been times where I'm like, God, I don't know what the heck I'm doing out here, except I know the pavement's right here, and I'm just gonna follow the pavement, and I'm not gonna look to my left or my right. And like, I hate it. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie. I'm so fearful of it. Well,
Yeah.
I used to be. Now we're doing good. But
Cool.
like with the John Wayne thing is like saddling up and knowing out there that you have a goal and that there's that anger that you can channel, and so it's like I can go out there and continue running, and I'll have the courage while I'm doing it, and after I'll do it, I'll get the courage then,
Yeah.
because I don't
Just
have.
also make sure that your courage is seasoned with wisdom because sometimes you can do dumb things when you're being
Yeah,
courageous.
yeah, I know. I like when I'm
Mm,
going runs, I'm like, sometimes I'll think, is this a stupid idea or is this a good idea? And most of the time it's borderline. Uh, it's like, okay, in worst case scenario, I'm stuck out here in the middle of farmland and I'm by myself, but I have my phone in case of emergencies, and I can run kind of fast, and I'm big, but I can't really fight. So like, in worst case scenario, I just run to like a farmer's house and knock on the door and be like, "Hey, bro, I need some help," and they'll probably have a shotgun or something. But the reality is, there's nothing that probably won't happen, and there's no cougars or anything like that. There's like coyotes.
for sure.
But still, like it's on the borderline of stupidity and like courage, and
Yeah,
I like that balance. I'm not. Uh, it's close, but it's not there. I could do way stupider stuff.
it's true.
So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I think that also brings like when you kind of hit on it, but like how conflict can like create connection ultimately, and where we can like lean into it or we can lean out of it, um, and almost act like a sloth, because some men struggle with like becoming a sloth when stuff is getting hard, and
yeah,
then they just go up and hide in the room or watch TV or something like that when they know they have work in front of them, or they need to put effort into their marriage or like friendships or relationships. And I
yeah.
really like how you talked about that.
Specifically, like how conflict creates, or is it? So, the quote is, I think I have it right up there.
Ah, sick.
Conflict, conflict is the doorway to intimacy.
Yeah, I wrote
Yeah,
greater connection, but yeah, it's intimacy is perfect.
yeah, yeah. I have the two quotes written up there. Conflict is the doorway to intimacy, and grieving is an invitation to fighting for something. So, but yeah, conflict is the doorway to intimacy because conflict, like battle, is usually over something that we value. Specifically with intimacy, it's like conflict is a chance to share your values and share your hurts with somebody that you love. Um, because the things that you value are not being like honored essentially, and you're
Mhm.
telling your partner like, hey, like this is a thing that you said that didn't sit right with me, or this is a thing that we did that I didn't feel like I could address my needs. And in the moment, maybe you didn't even know that they were your needs, and you didn't recognize that you had a need until the hurt already came, kind of, right. And in retrospect, you realize there was a need that
Yeah.
wasn't met. But sharing that is an opportunity for uh, like Shannon, in my example, to tell me that that like those needs are valuable to her as well, and that she didn't know, and that she wants to care for those needs with me. If there's some way that she can partner with me in that, and so by basically engaging in conflict, which isn't necessarily, it's not knockdown, drag out fighting or screaming at each other, right? That's rage. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a healthy anger, like
Yeah.
fighting for your needs essentially in relationship. And you have to temper those obviously with wisdom and with if you have a need that disregards the need of like your wife, it's
Mhm.
probably not, you probably need to rethink how that need is expressed, right? Because uh, it's like this isn't this isn't exact, but it's like the idea of like I need $100, so I have to take your $100. That's not just, right? That's not
Mhm.
like fair. Um, um, maybe we need to ask ourselves like, why do we quote unquote need $100? Is there a way we can meet it without taking from the other person? But
Mhm.
um, yeah, you're revealing that need, which is like part of your healthy shame, your limitedness, because you're basically saying like, I need something that I don't have. I'm limited right now, and I think you can partner with me to meet that. Then you are being vulnerable and sharing like a way that you're weak or like not necessarily whole on your own. You're inviting in my case, my wife, in to like take care of me. Even though like I'm a man, I'm supposed to be super tough and badass. But
Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah, I'll just say warriors generally fight in teams, right?
Yep.
It's because all of us are limited.
hmm Yeah, and that has to do with like you have to, as a team, you have to be selfless.
Hmm.
And I'm not married, but from what I've learned from you, is like you have to be like selfless. You have to care about the other person's needs, like you were saying. If
Hmm.
Shannon has $100 and you're like, hey, I need $100, and you go and steal her $100, that's not really caring for her needs.
Right.
Because if it's
Or
disadvantaging,
her wants. Yeah. It's
that
just
too.
not kind. It's not kind.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And it doesn't benefit either of you because in return you're gonna experience a consequence from that of taking her $100, and then she might
Hmm.
go, "Hey, I need justice back." Like what we talked about when we talked about like in Micah one time when we were reading through that and about justice,
Hmm.
uh, and about how like Israel and Micah and all of how we should go about justice. She might want justice in return, and so with that, that was a side tangent, but uh, like with the connection, when you have both two people with needs, you have to, and one person says, "Hey, I don't like how you're doing this," or "This is affecting me this way." Uh, you have to lean in, and if you work through that, it's gonna ultimately lead to a greater result and greater connection, and you'll be able to live life better, and you're going to ultimately have you'll be on the same plane, same mission, and
Yep.
where you're going,
Yeah.
which I think is a
Exactly.
beautiful thing.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and one of the other things is, I mean, it's kind of for me like with leaning into something that you don't, because not everyone always wants to do it. There's times where you don't feel like for you, you might not want to always. You might wake up and be like, bro, I really don't want to talk to Shannon, or you might be having a bad day, or like, there's been times for me where I'm like, I do not want to do my homework. I'm not saying my homework's my wife. That's not what I'm saying, and I ain't married. That's a horrible comparison. But
No, it's fine.
you
Go
get what
on.
I mean, though. Like, I don't, when you
Uh-huh.
don't want to do something, same thing
Hmm.
with reading your Bible and spending time in God's Word. There's going to be mornings where you don't want to, but it's ultimately a relationship with you and God, and you have to
Hmm.
lean into that when you feel like you don't want to. And that goes back to the feelings part. Is you can't control necessarily like what you feel, but you can control how you manage it and how you react from it.
Yep.
Because there's been times, 95% of the time when I go and work out, I do not want to work out at all, but I know I
Yeah.
should work out, and I know I'll feel better after working out,
Yeah.
and I still work out. Same thing with reading my Bible and praying. I know I'll feel better, and like having breath, like fresh breath in my lungs if I do that.
Yeah.
Even though the majority of the time it's early in the morning, like 5 a.m. in the morning, and I don't feel like it. I'm sleepy and I'm falling asleep, and I don't always want to do it, but I know it's gonna feel good. And even if
Yeah.
it doesn't feel good, I know I'm creating a stronger connection with the Lord. Uh,
Yeah. No, like I think a thing too that I tell myself a lot is feelings aren't always right. So like what I feel might not accurately reflect whatever just happened, but they are
mhm,
true in the sense that like that's the way that I perceived that event.
mhm,
So an example would be like if Shannon says something to me that um, that hurts me, there's a chance that whatever she said wasn't actually hurtful and she didn't intend for it to hurt me, but I felt hurt because it reminded me of some time my parents hurt me in the past or whatever, right?
mhm,
Um, and so while she didn't mean to hurt me, my feelings weren't right in the sense that like they weren't like Shannon owes me sort of thing. They were true in the sense that like I experienced hurt, and therefore if I don't want to experience resentment, I need to tell Shannon, hey, this thing you said, I don't think that you actually meant it to hurt me, but it felt hurtful. And because Shannon's kind, she'll probably say like, wow, I didn't realize that that hurt you. Like, I'm
mhm,
really sorry. Why did it hurt you? And this gets to like kind of what I was saying is, or what I wanted to say is, because our feelings aren't always right, but they are true. We need to recognize that our feelings oftentimes are shaped by a belief that we have, and our beliefs might not be right. So when it comes to doing something that we don't want to do, um, part of it might be because it's uncomfortable, right? Like
yeah.
if you want to do ice baths or you got to lift like a really heavy squat, like a lot of times that doesn't feel good. But the reason we go out there ultimately is because, like you said, we believe that it'll make us feel better in the future, or we believe that it's good for us, or we believe that we, made a promise to complete X number of workouts, X number of
Mhm,
weeks. And so like in order to be faithful to what we promised, we're going to go out and do the thing that we said. And
Mm.
ultimately we have to have healthy shame, right? Like let's say we go out and we say we're going to squat 275 today or whatever, and like you didn't sleep more than 4 hours the night before for whatever reason, like you're more likely to get injured when you haven't slept well. So
Yeah.
maybe you can honor your promise to get out there and squat as much as you can, but you got to accept that that day you can only squat 225 because you really want to preserve your body and make sure that you can get out there and squat again the next day or the next week or in 2 days or whatever. Not the next day because you got to have a rest day, right?
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, like we have to form our beliefs around what we actually want to believe,
Mm.
and it will influence what you feel because our beliefs like dictate to some extent how we feel. There's some things that are like evolutionary, right? It's like biology. Like like if you point a gun at me, I'm always going to feel afraid that I'm going to die to some extent, right? Because
Oh,
like
you're Rambo.
we're,
You
we're
don't feel any emotions, bro. It's so
no,
crazy.
we're conditioned to survive. We're
Yeah.
conditioned to stay alive. So there's some things like that that like we shouldn't try to change that feeling because it comes from a just place or the way things ought to be. To go back to Micah, right? So what I
Mm.
taught you guys is that justice means the way things ought to be. Um, but there's lots of feelings that we have about being hurt or scared or ashamed that don't come from good places. Like maybe they're thoughts about what your body does or doesn't look like, or what sorts of skills you do or don't have in the professional or athletic sphere. Like a lot of times those are from badly formed beliefs.
Mhm.
And so we can care for our feelings by changing what we believe, writing out what we do believe, writing out what we wish that we believed, and then meditating on the belief that we want to have. Um, it's why like prayer is important. I don't know if you ever heard people say like we don't pray for God or whatever. We pray for ourselves. We pray so that our brains can, or not to change God's mind, but to change our own mind, sort of thing. Like
Mhm.
prayer can be like a meditation on what is true. That's why
Mm.
if you ever look at like old like high church collects, which are
Yeah.
like prayer formats, a lot of times they start with just saying out loud something that God is. So like God, you are this way. The Bible tells me that you are this way, and we repeat that out loud because if we say that
Mm.
thing enough times regularly, we'll probably start to believe it, and we'll see how God is that way in our lives. Um, so yeah, um, yeah, beliefs definitely impact feelings. On that note, not wanting to do things.
Yeah, dude. I mean, uh, one of the things like I think beliefs heavily shape like how we live our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And for like for many people, like for me, like with starting the podcast, I was like, I don't feel qualified. I have no experience, but I know people that can talk about these things, and I have the belief that ultimately this will have an impact in other men's lives. And
Mm-hmm.
at some point, even though it won't look like it for a long period of time, maybe it does, but and maybe it never even has an impact. But I have a belief there that I'm doing these things and I'm producing this stuff, so at some point it will impact at least one person's life. Having the belief there. Same thing with running. I am doing my training for the marathon, having the belief that if I run this amount, that hopefully it'll create this result for the marathon day. Like, yeah, I can come with numerous results.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and like with the beliefs whole thing is sometimes we'll have with the feelings. Like sometimes you'll feel anger from like what someone else says, like for if Shannon were to say something for you, but that doesn't mean that feeling's not right. It just means there might be a situation where you perceive something and
Mm-hmm.
she might actually not be like doing it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a really good book. It's called Psycho Cybernetics,
Mm-hmm.
and essentially it talks about like the power of like belief and how we believe we might not be worth something, like whether how your body looks or worth like that person or worth that relationship or worth like that goal or that dream job or anything like that, and realizing like that you are worth it, and you can
Mm-hmm.
ultimately achieve it. Yeah, which I think is a pretty cool thing. But
Yeah, it is.
yeah, so we kind of briefly talked about it, about how like as men sometimes like the example of like the daughter dying and the dude be like, bro, I gotta act all stoic and not show emotion.
Yeah.
Like all of that. And the reality is when you show emotion, show grief, it's showing not only is it healing process that God talks about and calls us to do,
Hmm.
um, but it shows to the people around us in our community how to properly handle that, um,
Hmm.
and how people can affect us. And with that, that's just one example of like leading well. And like King David, uh, there's examples of him and how he led well among his people. But yeah, could you talk to about that, like with leading, as you was like captain of the army, and also like how, because I feel like you've always led me well, almost like a spiritual father, and like you never told me do this or don't do this. It was never
Hmm.
like, dude, you gotta go and lift or you gotta run or anything like that. You would always give me potential options, and I think
Hmm.
that's different than being like an actual father, because and that's different. Or if you're a captain, you're gonna be like, do this instead of you can maybe do this or maybe do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to
I mean,
know some of the different ways like you've learned over the years of how to lead people and effectively communicate with it.
my foundational belief about leadership at this point in my life, I don't sure if I thought about it hard enough, I could figure out when I started thinking this way, but a lot of people think that being in charge or like being a leader is about being in power, but I
Mm-hmm.
believe that being a leader is about empowering the people that you're leading. So like I used to be a rifle platoon leader in the army, right?
Mm-hmm.
And my job as a rifle platoon leader sometimes was just to sit up by the machine guns on a radio and make sure that the machine guns are pointed in a place that suppress the enemy for my assaulters, uh, um, and that the machine gun team leader knows where those assaulters are. Um, so I'm balancing like lethality with safety,
Mm-hmm.
um, and I'm facilitating the ability of my machine gunners to do what their job is, which is to suppress, and my assaulters to do what their job is, which is to assault. Um, and sometimes like we'd have mortars or we'd have helicopters, and my job again is the same thing. Is like those are called enablers, like from that perspective, and so they're enabling my assaulters to take an objective, right? Or enabling my platoon to complete its mission, whatever. And so my job in that case is not to feel big and powerful about all the enablers that I'm in charge of, because ultimately I'm not in charge of the enabler, right? Like there's a pilot up there who has a bunch of expertise in piloting, and there's a machine gunner behind a machine gun that's way better at the machine gun than me, and there's go on, mortarmen who are way better aiming mortars than me. I'm making sure that those people are empowered to do their job to the best of their ability. And then if it's like not a combat situation, like I might have a guy who is having family problems, like maybe him and his wife aren't doing well, or he has a sick kid. Like my job is to make sure that his role as a soldier doesn't get in the way of his ability to also be a father or a husband or whatever. I'm supposed to empower him to do as best as he can at all those things, given his limitedness. We'll come back to limitedness forever if you let me. Um, so yeah, ultimately, like leadership is about not dictating what people should or shouldn't do, or telling people what they are or aren't, or what they will or won't be. My job is to find out, like, let's go back to justice, what they ought to be,
Mm-hmm.
like if you're a Christian or a man or an athlete or even just like maybe not an athlete, but like you're just like casually athletic, like
Yeah.
my job if I'm in leadership over somebody or if I'm being a leader is to find out what it means to be that thing, what you ought to be as a soldier, a father, a athlete, whatever, and then empower you to the best of my ability, whatever influence I have over the matter, to like to get as close to the ideal as possible. Um, and so like as a husband, right? Like my job is not to be in charge of my house. It's to make sure that my wife has as much ability as possible to be the greatest human being that she can be, the best wife that she can be, the best mother that she can be, the best scientist that she can be, the best athlete that she can be, and Shannon's all of those things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, So I'm empowering her like from my place of power. And Shannon empowers me from her place of power a lot of times because she empowers me to be kind by being kind.
Mm,
Because you can't be kind if you're under threat by your spouse, right?
yeah.
Um, yeah, um, you can't like offer wisdom if people aren't asking for wisdom. Like, so we ask each other for wisdom. But yeah, so like with you, like my goal was never to make you the best football player or basketball player or runner or whatever. Like ultimately that's up to you to decide you want to do that thing. And once you tell me that's what you're trying to do, yeah, I'll give you some like advice. But I've basically always tried to tell you like this isn't the only opinion. Like this is my opinion, or this is a thing that I know about that. This is a thing that I've heard, but I don't necessarily know. I try to like be honest about how much expertise I have about whatever I'm telling you.
Hmm.
And also I've tried to always give you options. Like you said, like sometimes you ask me about like politics or theology or something, and I
Yeah.
try to say like, well, some people believe this, some people believe this, and this is why to the best of my knowledge.
Yeah.
And I think like when we think about this, we should consider X, Y, and Z so that we have a moderated opinion and not a bipolar opinion or polarized opinion. Sorry. But yeah, same thing with fitness is like ultimately as a soldier and just a human being, like I don't really want to be a long distance runner. I don't want to be the strongest guy in the room. My belief about my fitness was I was always wanted to be enabled or empowered to
Hmm.
do anything, whether that's climb a wall, a mountain, run a certain amount, ruck a certain amount, participate in sports, shooting, whatever. I wanted to be capable, and I still that's like my main goal is being capable. And I think now that I'm older, like I think more about like health and longevity and like being able to like raise my kid or hopefully kids, right? Like so ultimately like I'm participating in fitness to be empowered.
Yeah.
And I'm capable of passing that on. And for you, like you went from like always trying to lift a bigger weight to all of a sudden, like, I don't know, 6 months ago, you're just like, I'm going to try to run really far. And like, that's super cool. And so
Yeah.
I didn't tell you how to run super far because I've never been really into running super far. I have run decent distances before, but I care about you being able to continue to pursue running super far, not just
Yeah.
for a year, but for like 5 years if you want to. So I've given you
Mhm.
advice on how to cross train so that you're preventing injury and how to like ease your way into whatever you're doing so that you don't get overuse injuries. That's like where my mind's at with like running super far, right? And we both have ACL reconstruction, so like I have some experience as far as like pain management and
Mhm.
being I always call it like being kind to
Yeah.
an injury if you have one that you ought to be kind to. And the further away you get from surgery, obviously that changes and stuff. I had surgery
Mhm.
in 2009, so a mere 14 or 15 years ago. But um, yeah, like I haven't babied the knee, but I've like listened to it. Like if I ever feel pain, I don't
Mhm.
stop moving. I do single leg touchdowns and I try to strengthen my hip or whatever's going to support it. So I'm trying to listen to it and be kind so that I can continue to work out and pick heavy things up and walk up mountains and whatever else I
Mhm.
need to do.
Yeah. I think it's really cool. So, like, essentially, leadership is empowerment, and I think Jesus talks about it how we're supposed to be servant leaders, and that's just a different way to phrase it. Is leadership's empowerment. I've seen that. I've seen you do that with me and with other men, of like helping them when they come to you, like helping them to become better men and saying, "Oh, like I know these people" or something like that. And one of the things that you taught me from a young age, just seeing you do it and interacting with you, is like filtering in opinions and advice. So like now that I'm 18 and everyone's like, "Oh, you should do this for college," or "Oh, you should go here," thinking like, "Oh, what are all the different options, and how can we best go there, and where are my goals, and how does this best fit together?" Um, and looking at all the different areas of it and get like a not just like a polarized version of it, but a good overall like overarching uh,
Hmm.
belief of it and figuring out what I want to do so I can be focused on it and like pinpoint accuracy and where I want to go.
Hmm.
Because everyone's always like, "Oh, you should go here and you should go here and you should go here." And I think one of the beautiful things that you taught me was I can hear an opinion here and hear an opinion there and see this and see that and ultimately put it together and find a good overall truth that I can use in my life and ultimately move forward, um,
Yeah.
which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think like the Bible exemplifies that. There's like proverbs that state exact opposite things, and the reason is because like there are
Mhm.
a lot of things that are true given certain contexts, and our job is not to find like one statement of truth. There's definitely like things that I like beliefs I have about who Jesus is or who I ought to be as a man that are like pretty boiled down and like short statements of truth. So like I call those my dogmas.
Yeah,
But I also have I don't probably said it to you eventually like dogma is helpful until it becomes unhelpful, in the
yeah,
sense that like life is complex and it's chaotic, and those dogmas, the way I say it is like when trauma hits us, they determine which way we bounce, which
oh yeah,
direction we fly. But once we're in the air, like we need to make sure that we're paying attention to context and nuance so that we can uh, usher those truths into our situation and see how they're true in that situation. And that's kind of the point of the Proverbs being different is like there's some situations where you should answer a fool, and there's some situations where you shouldn't, and you need to use your wisdom to figure out whether or not you need to speak up, right?
yeah.
Um, I can't remember the person who said it. It's a famous quote that's like, "You won't be remembered for the things that you say. You'll be remembered for the things that you don't say." Something
Mhm.
along those lines. So like sometimes we should speak up, sometimes we shouldn't. Um, wisdom determines which thing we should do. So try to do that with everything. It's like, um, and there's varying levels of how often something is true. There's some things that are true like 80% of the time, right? There's some
Mhm.
things that are true 30% of the time, and you have to figure out like, is this one of the 80 or one of the 30%? And if a lot of times too, I found like whether it's like what kind of school to go to or what type of workout you should do, like there are some that are true 80% of the time for a good reason. And if we pick a different version, we should pay attention to why that thing is most often reliable and maybe try to like reflect some of its best features in the alternative decision that we choose.
Mhm.
Um, and we should never choose something because we're mad at the opposite. We should always choose something
Yeah.
because we're mad or we're angry for the result that we want to get. Um, a lot of people make decisions in their life to piss someone off or just to like clap back at something that hurt them, and
Mhm.
that's resentment. That's not a helpful way to make any kind of decision, right? Um, we need to be intrinsically motivated to do something, not extrinsically motivated. So,
Mhm. Yeah, I remember last year. It was almost about the same last year, about the same time of the year in January, where my parents sat me down and they were like, "We're gonna have you move back to private school." And I was pissed for probably a good 24 hours. Like I was adamantly like enraged. I don't think I've been that mad in a long time.
mm-hmm.
And but I gave myself space to be away in my room and read scripture. And well, for the first like 10 hours of it, I was just pissed. I was just in my room, like I wasn't doing anything. I was just mad. I gave myself time
Mm-hmm.
and space. And I remember thinking there's two options I really have that I've heard of is like you said, I can be externally motivated and hearing like, oh yeah, I could just screw with my parents and now I could go and do all these things to screw with them and like do all these bad things and be like, oh yeah, look at me, you wanted me to do this, now I'm doing this, and just mess with them. Uh, and ultimately, that is making them like empowering them over my life,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives me no control over my life, which I think is pretty funny. If I'm going, oh yeah, screw you, you suck. Now I'm going to do these things just to screw with you, that my
Yep.
whole life is determined by what they did instead of saying, no, I have control over these things and I have control over my actions. I have control over what the words I speak and
Yep.
being intrinsically motivated, as you said, and going out to the world, being intentional, having the goals, knowing what I want to do, uh, and not being motivated by what someone else did, but being motivated by what I can do, which
Yeah.
I think is a unique thing and pretty cool thing.
That was what we talked about in the car at Chick-fil-A, right?
Yeah.
After
Chick-fil-A
Yeah.
talks are the best, bro. I think we should have a separate podcast just for
Um,
Chick-fil-A talks. We'll call it
we
Chick-fil-A
should.
talks.
Yeah. We just
And
sit in my truck and eat Chick-fil-A and talk
yeah,
about whatever is going
we'll
on.
have like one microphone and we'll have it set up and we'll have one camera and it'll just be Chick-fil-A talks.
Yeah. And the
It'd
intro
be
and
fun.
outro music can always be cool hardcore music.
Yeah, and we could like have some like ABR or I'm always
Yeah.
ABR is my OG for that. I think it's the GOAT. But
It's not a
yeah,
bad
you were saying
choice.
no. Yeah, you were saying no in the car.
Yeah.
You, you were saying though, like when in that
Oh,
like yeah, yeah, you're
no,
good.
I just in the car, I think I remember saying basically like there's a lot of stuff you can't control. Like you can't control that you're going to go to another school because your parents have a say
Mhm.
over that, right? But you can control like what you choose. And part of I can't remember if you had already decided not to do football anymore at that point, but
Mhm.
you chose not to do football anymore around that time. And basically we talked about like you could find some other athletic thing to do because I can't remember if it was the same conversation, but we talked about how like football probably wasn't going to be something that you excelled at, but there was a lot of things that you were like super good at that you could
Mhm.
participate in. Maybe we were talking about basketball at the time, but I remember at some point you said you were
No,
going to
it
play
was
golf, and
football.
then
Yeah, you're right.
we talked about rowing and stuff like that too, and
Yeah.
now you're like running. But um yeah, we talked about that, and we talked about uh I don't know, people you could hang out with, and some of
Yeah.
the your parents had talked to me about some of the academic opportunities you'd have there. Basically, you'd have like more attention or something,
Yeah.
for some of the ways that you struggled with school at the time. And I think some of those things ended up being true. And I think I
Mhm.
saw you like slowly like accept that you weren't going to go to a certain school anymore, and you were going to go to a new school, and you're going to look for all the opportunities to do the things that you really wanted to do before you were done being a high schooler. So um, yeah, the running thing kind of caught me by surprise because it's the antithesis of what you talked about all the time. But
Yeah.
it's cool to
How
just
so?
like,
How so?
oh, because like all the time you were just like, you just wanted to watch like Ronnie Coleman videos and talk about
Oh
big
yeah.
lifts and Eddie Hall and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then you decided like I'm not gonna lift big anymore. Also, every time I go up to the gym now after you're up there and I see what weights you have on the rack or whatever, they're not like the biggest weights you could
They're
possibly
teeny,
put
bro.
up.
I like that will give me anorexia. Like I'm looking at those weights and I'm like, dude, what's like I'm the biggest I've ever been, but I'm lifting
Yeah,
the smallest weights, but I'm in the best shape of my life. And I'm like, how did I not figure out this formula when I was younger? But
yeah,
it's just like how we develop over time is a beautiful thing. And like looking in comparison to last year, like now you're about to have a kid. Like I if you were to ask me like a year ago, if I like saw like any of this happening, I would have been like, yeah, bro. But inside, I would have been like, no, I didn't see myself running a marathon. Like I would have thought you were stupid or crazy. Thinking that I would run a marathon. Like I couldn't even run then.
mhm,
And then now I'm running marathons. I'm running like 7 to 8 miles a day. Next week I'm gonna be like almost at 10 a day, and in a month I'll be running like 24 mile, like having 1 24 mile day a week. And then now I'm
mhm.
doing the podcast. I'm going into real estate in the next year. Like all these things, I would have thought you were crazy, but how the Lord has His hand over you and how you develop is a beautiful thing. Like lifting, for example. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's kind of funny because it I yeah, I would have never thought I would be running because the whole thing was I was just trying
Yeah,
to get as big as possible and as shredded as possible without using steroids, which is a pretty dang hard thing to do. And yeah, it was yeah, I remember. So yeah, it's pretty funny.
yeah. But I think like it's cool because the lessons you learn from like lifting probably translate to running, like showing up,
Hmm.
like consistency, for example, and like, paying attention to like what you're capable of that day. I'm sure that eventually, if you run long enough, there will be days where like you go out for a 15-mile run and you're like 8 miles in, you're like, dude, I feel like bad. And
Yeah.
maybe it's because of something you ate, or maybe it's because you slept. And if you're mature enough, you'll be like, I'm gonna walk home and I'm gonna get back on track. I'm gonna like sleep 10 hours tonight and get back on track tomorrow.
Mhm.
I've definitely had days like that, and like the military is a place where you can't do that, and I ended up getting injuries. But now that I'm in control of my own schedule, yeah, there's been times where I've like lapsed and been less fit than I should be. I haven't like taken advantage of the opportunity to work out when I could. But
Mm-hmm.
right now is especially a time where like sometimes we run like 6 miles and sometimes we don't, and it's based on sleep and food and how hydrated I am and what the weather feels like and whether or not I'd rather do a different type of lift that day. And there's like a lot of freedom to pursue fitness without being forced by a plan to dictate what that is. And I'm sure it'll change again at some point in the future, but yeah, being aware of what you need and what you deserve. Like I have like also on this board, I have the word should crossed out and I have the word deserve underlined because I'm trying to change all my should do's to deserve to's.
Yeah, that's
It's
a
a
good way of putting it.
fun little wisdom statement for you. Is like it's not I should eat right. It's I deserve to eat right. Like my body deserves to be treated well, or I should go do mobility. No, I deserve to go do mobility because I'd like to keep squatting. And last time I squatted, my left hip was tight or whatever, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's
Yeah.
about like, back to like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. It's like a good example of it. But
Yeah, I think deserving to do it kind of shifts the way you think about something. From like,
hmm
oh, I should do this, I should do that, because I feel like that's more from a shame standpoint.
hmm yeah.
And that was some like at the beginning of when I was running, like last year, and I was doing my
hmm
marathon training. There was times I had to skip because I wasn't feeling like my knee wasn't doing good, and then I'd feel shame for a while, and I was like, "Oh, I should have ran. I should have ran." And I was like, "Oh, I should have done this. I should have done that." And I
hmm
was like, "Dude, I can't run. My knees, it's swollen
Yep.
up like a balloon. I
Yeah.
can't literally run." Uh, and instead of shifting that perspective to now, where it's become a I deserve to run. I know
hmm
I feel great when I run, and I know how I like to run, and I know that I love to run, and so I deserve to. I deserve to get
Yeah.
good sleep. I deserve to spend time with people that I want to be intentional with and that create positive energy into my life and that we grow closer to God. And
Yeah.
so you deserve to. And I think that's a good perspective shift.
Yeah. Well, like, and what talking about your knee being swollen, at that time you were saying I should run, but you actually deserved to rest. Like you
Yeah.
deserve to heal. And if it means that like your first marathon time isn't exactly what you want it to be,
Yeah.
who cares? Like there's other marathons as long as you're not dead. Like you can train up again the next 6 months and shave, 20 minutes or an hour or whatever you
Yeah.
end up
Yeah.
shaving off. It's like respecting the process of like getting good at running far and recognizing that like it might take consistency for years instead of months or months instead of weeks, whatever your expectation was, right? Just like recognizing your healthy shame, your healthy limitedness, um, and accepting it and being like, yeah, like this is going to be the best that I can do right now. And that's okay because you can treat it like it's like a bookmark, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's where I was at this month and this year. And hopefully at this month and this year, I can be at this. And if you make it, cool, then shift your goal to be harder. If you don't make it, cool, like accept your healthy limitedness and then adjust your goal so that it's realistic so that you can attain it, and just
Yeah.
like just keep at it, be consistent,
Yeah.
explore. Back to the original story,
Yeah.
exploration, creativity.
And I think that was one of the cool things I learned from you about like exploration and creativity was when I wanted to figure out like what I wanted to do and what I want to pursue as a career someday and what I want to focus on like college wise and whatnot. You taught me like how to explore and like try a bunch of new things. We did like every 3 months we do a different style of workout. I remember what's the dude with the like sexy beard? Yeah, Pat McNamara. So we did those workouts and we're throwing a ball over like a friggin' like a
Yeah, over the rack
yeah,
and
over
then
the rack and then
dick ducking under to the rubber
coming
band and
under
catching it.
and like catching the ball.
hmm
And I remember thinking like, how is it gonna translate? But it kind of did. And then there were like other times where it was just like pure strength for like five
hmm
months, and we
When we were
tested
like bear
those.
hugging oh, well, you shout out, yeah, when
Oh
we did one
yeah,
rep max all the
and
time.
we do the
But
like yeah we
in
do
the
the
Pat Mac,
bottom
we do the
squat.
bear hug squats with like the
Yeah,
whole
and we
stack
do
of
the bear hug
plates.
squats, and we do it with like the like yeah the bear hug squats, and then you have the plates, and you try to stack as many plates as possible until you couldn't hold it anymore. And then we
Yeah.
do times where it would be 5x5s or like 5x6 or 5x10s or something like that to build strength. And then there were other times where
Yeah.
we focused mostly on running,
Mm-hmm.
and with some cross training. But
Mm-hmm.
with that, there's shoot, I just forgot what I was talking about.
You're talking
Uh,
about creativity and exploration.
oh yeah, but so like from that, I realized that I wanted to apply that to me figuring out what I wanted to do. So I
Mm-hmm.
started like figuring out every single person, every single job field, and being like, "Hey," interviewing them, grabbing them for coffee, and be like, "Hey, what do you love about your job? What makes you want to get up in the morning and do it? Why are you passionate about it? What makes it fun? What does the day to day look like? What are the people involved? How does the pay look like? What are your hours normally look like? Are you can control what's the freedom? All of those things. And then from there, exploring that and then looking like, for example, I was in digital marketing for a while and I was like, oh, sick, this is going to be it. And I looked at the day to day and I was like, this sucks. Like, this sucks booty cheeks. I would never do this, bro.
You
And I
shouldn't
was
suck
like,
booty cheeks.
yeah, bro, don't suck booty cheeks, especially when you're not married. Uh, Save it for marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, bro, so like exploring and figuring out different things so you can ultimately know what you want to do. I learned that from you, so I was like, oh, I've always loved like running or doing hard things with a lot of people. So then I started running with a lot of different people and having them runs. Like that's one reason why I run with Brian Moore is he's faster than me, way faster than me. And so I get faster that way, but I also love doing teamwork stuff. You taught me that when we do the workouts with Taylor, or like there were other people we do workouts with. And by doing that and doing it with a group, it made me explore what I love doing, my passions, and like the edge, basically the farthest I could go,
Mm-hmm.
until I had to quit or until I couldn't go anymore. And so with that and exploring, I realized I came to like upon real estate and like stuff like that. And so, but exploring and over a course of several years, getting to talk to people and exploring the day to day and exploring how stuff worked and doing courses and figuring out, oh, does this SEO stuff work? Does this sales stuff work? What does marketing look like? All this stuff. By exploring what you taught me how to explore, it led to like an obsession and a passion, which I think is very beautiful. And it's cool that you taught me that because I've seen how that also is shown in your life of how you explored from going from like rugby to theater to running to you played like soccer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, soccer and like lifting. You were a freaking crazy power lifter. Well, not really a power lifter, but you put up some numbers way more than me.
Yeah.
And so yeah, like all those different things, exploring all those things, I think is a unique characteristic that not many people do, especially in my generation, because most people are scared to go out there and try new things for the fear of failure.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, dude, it was great talking to you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Yeah, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me.